We've made it to the halfway point of the 2025 college football season, and this is the point where I kind of change my process for how I do my top 25 rankings. Because really at this point now, it's all about resume. Most teams have played at least, have played multiple quality opponents by this point. Now, there are some teams who really still haven't played anyone much, but for the most part, everyone has played, at least a couple of decent teams. And so it's really going to come down to the resume. But what I did a little bit different this year with what I've done in past years, because if you go by the College Football Playoff Committee, they normally say that winning margin does not matter. That's in the verbiage of how they do their rankings. And so I've kind of followed that. And, I don't really care what the winning margin is. I've just looked at the resume, who have you beat, all that. But I did make a little bit of a shift this year. And I'm looking at games that are won comfortably. That's how I'm going to define it. It doesn't matter if you won 50-3 or you won 35-10. Just games that are comfortably won. And I do give a little bit of a bonus for that. And so that you might see that in these rankings, especially with some of the teams at the top. But again, it is mostly just about the resume. Who have you beat? Who did you lose to? And all of that. So let's get started at the bottom. And I actually feel pretty good about these rankings. I think there will be some arguments, but I don't think you guys can argue too much if we are basing this solely off the resume. Again, there were a few head-to-head, a few teams where I was like, should this team be here? Should this team be there? And it is tough, but I feel like for the most part, we did a pretty good job with these rankings. And so, again, let's get started. 21 through 25. So we got Cincinnati at number 25, Nebraska 24, Texas at number 23, Illinois at 22, Virginia at number 21. So these teams all at the bottom, but they all are ranked. You look at Cincinnati, a win over Iowa State, that's really their best win. Nebraska has the win over Cincinnati, and they have a win over Maryland, which is, a decent win. They've only lost a couple of games. So, again, head-to-head also has to matter here. So that's why Nebraska ahead of Cincinnati for me. And then we got Texas. Really, the only reason they are ranked is because not just the fact that they beat Oklahoma, but they won that game comfortably. In the second half, they really pulled away, took care of business there. That was enough for me to rank them. Illinois, I believe this team should be ranked. They have a win over USC, who is ranked. I am pretty high in my rankings, which you'll see. And forget about what you saw last week. You may see some things here that look totally different from how I ranked teams last week. It's because it's a totally different formula here. Again, I had the tier system going, but that is gone. We're just doing off of resume. They also have a comfortable win over Duke. That's just a 2-loss team. That one looks really good right now. They took care of business against Purdue in a game that they should have won easily. So Illinois, and you also look at the fact that they lost to, I don't want to give away my rankings, but they lost to 2 top 5 teams, Indiana and Ohio State. And I realize they were not all that competitive in those games, but still, let's say they didn't play those 2 teams and they played, a Mississippi State and, I don't know, Maryland or whatever. If they had won those games and they were undefeated, where would Illinois be ranked right now? So I think you have to look at who they lost to. No, they were not really competitive in those games. That's why they're not ranked higher. But I think they've done enough to be in the top 25. And then Virginia ahead of them. The loss to NC State really is what's hurting them. The win over Louisville is a solid win. Louisville's only got 1 loss. And then Florida State, I know they've got 3 losses. That's still a pretty good team. And then the win over Stanford, which they won comfortably. So Virginia is right there at number 21. Let's move on to 16 through 20. I've got Vanderbilt at number 20. They are 5-1. And then we've got Missouri ahead of them, LSU ahead of them, South Florida, and then Tennessee at number 16. So a team that really jumps out when I did look at the AP poll after I made my rankings just to see how I compared. I think LSU is being overrated a little bit. But let's just go through this. So Vanderbilt, they've got a convincing win over South Carolina. That's their only decent win. South Carolina is a 3-loss team, but the fact that they won that game convincingly, that helps. You look at Missouri, they have one over South Carolina as well, but they also have that win over Kansas. I know Kansas now has 3 losses, but that's still a pretty good win. And both of these teams lost to Alabama, who you'll see they're in the top 10. So that's why you got Missouri and Vanderbilt here. LSU, their wins are against South Carolina, Clemson, and Florida. And none of those were comfortable wins. Those were all pretty close games. They don't have a win over a really good team. They don't have a comfortable win over a mediocre team. So LSU, I think this is a team that might be being overrated a little bit. I still think the potential is there. If that offense can get going, I think LSU could be really, really good. But based off of what we've seen so far this season, I don't think they should be ranked anywhere near the top 10. In fact, I think South Florida should be ahead of them. They went on the road and beat Florida. LSU beat Florida at home. And then it comes down to how much do you value wins over North Texas and Boise State. Now, they won those games comfortably. These are a pretty good group of 5 teams. And the fact that they lost to Miami, who is a top 5 team, I think South Florida should be ranked probably at this spot. Tennessee, they've got the win over Mississippi State. They've got a comfortable win over Syracuse. I know that's a 3-loss team. The Arkansas win, that does not look great. That's a 4-loss team right now, and they won that game close. But they did lose to Georgia, who is going to be ranked up in the top 10 as well. So it's really very close, I would say, with Tennessee, South Florida, and LSU. If you want to move those teams around, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But I think those 3 teams have done enough to kind of separate themselves from Missouri and Vanderbilt. All right, let's go to 11 through 15. I got BYU number 15, Georgia Tech at number 14, Utah at 13, Oklahoma 12, USC at number 11. So why are these teams ranked here? Well, Georgia Tech and BYU are undefeated. Neither team's really beaten anyone, and neither one of these teams has really won a game comfortably against a mediocre team. You know, you look at Georgia Tech, they got wins over Wake Forest, Clemson, and Colorado. BYU, the wins over Arizona, Colorado. They did beat West Virginia easily. But, I mean, you look at the opponents here, and they just really haven't played anyone, but they're undefeated. That has to matter. If you can get to this point halfway through the season and you're undefeated and you've got 3 wins over conference opponents, or at least Power 4 opponents, I think that's enough to put them ahead of, again, Tennessee, South Florida, LSU. Those teams really don't have a great resume either. And honestly, there are not many teams that have good resumes at this point. We're really kind of picking out, oh, well, at least they've got a couple of decent wins, but they're, you got to get into the top 10 really before you start seeing actually pretty good resumes. And again, a big reason is because we're only halfway through the season. I think Utah's resume is actually really strong. They only lost to Texas Tech. That's a top 5 team in my opinion. And they won comfortably in all of their games against Power 4 competition. Arizona State, UCLA, West Virginia. I know those aren't great teams, but the fact that they went out and dominated, that has to matter. And that's why I've got them at 13. Oklahoma at number 12. Mostly because of the win over Michigan and the fact that they won that game comfortably. They also have a win over Auburn. So, again, very close with Oklahoma and Utah. And now that I'm looking at it, perhaps I should have put Utah ahead of Oklahoma just because they have the better loss. Texas Tech's a better loss than Texas. But anyways, it's very, very close there. I could see, again, I think Michigan is a better team than Arizona State. Arizona State did not have Sam Leavitt, so that plays into this as well. But it's very close with Oklahoma and Utah. Now we get to USC. Their only loss came to Illinois, and a game that they really had a great shot to win. That was a very, very close game on the road. In Illinois, I have ranked. Then they've got comfortable wins over Michigan, Michigan State, and Purdue. They won all those games by multiple scores. Michigan is the best win, obviously, there. And I would say they beat Michigan come more comfortably than Oklahoma. That's why I think they should be ranked ahead of Oklahoma. And again, wins over Michigan State and Purdue, those aren't great teams, but they won those games easily. I think that has to matter a little bit. So, yeah, I think USC's resume is actually pretty strong at this point with the win over Michigan really helping them out. Let's go to the top 10 now. 6 through 10. You got Notre Dame at number 10. I know people are still going to complain because they have 2 losses, but if you look at the resume, both of their losses came in one-score games. It's the top 5 teams. They have a comfortable win over Boise State, NC State, Purdue, Arkansas. They have dominated against all the teams that they've played outside of Miami and Texas A&M. To me, that is enough to reward them with a top 10 spot. I've got them at number 10. I've got Oregon just ahead of them. Oregon's resume all of a sudden does not look near as good as maybe we thought. Indiana is a loss. Their best win is at Northwestern. Northwestern just beat Penn State, so Northwestern is a better win than Penn State. And so that Penn State win all of a sudden just does not look great. It was on the road. It was a game that they controlled, so I do give them credit for that. But that's it. Northwestern, Penn State. I mean, I don't even think you can give them any credit for Oklahoma State, as bad as the Cowboys are. So I've got Oregon there. Again, I don't think they should be really near the top 5 with that resume. I think Georgia ahead of them. Losing to Alabama, top 10 team. They've got the win over Tennessee. They won comfortably against Kentucky. They went on the road and beat Auburn. That's a decent resume. Alabama with wins over Missouri, Georgia, and Vanderbilt. Those are all top 25 teams. That's a very, very strong resume. In fact, they've got more. They have 3 wins over 1-loss teams. No other team can say that. No other team has 3 wins over 1-loss teams. So that is really a strong resume there. The Florida State loss hurts, and so I don't really know what do you do about that? Florida State's all of a sudden a team with 3 losses, but they're not a bad team. They've been competitive in their games. It's not like they're getting blown out. That's a weird one. I don't know what you do with that. And you also, I think, have to look a little bit at how the teams have improved. Alabama's obviously playing much better football. Now, Ole Miss is another team that does not have a great resume, but they're undefeated. I think that's enough to put them up here at number 6. They won comfortably against Tulane. They have the win over LSU. Kentucky, Arkansas, close wins for them. Maybe I'm wrong here, but it feels like Ole Miss and LSU are 2 teams that are possibly overrated, and they're going to maybe get exposed down the stretch. Now, the schedules aren't terrible for those 2 teams, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if we saw Ole Miss and LSU both lose at least a couple of games in the second half of the season. All right, let's go to the top 5 now. And this is how I've got it. I've got Texas Tech at 5, Texas A&M at 4, Ohio State at 3, Miami at number 2, and Indiana at number 1. And I think you have to put them at number 1. If we're going by resume, we'll start with Texas Tech. Dominant wins over Utah and Houston. Also now Kansas. Utah and Houston, those are both 1-loss teams. So this is a pretty strong resume for Texas Tech. You look at Texas A&M, wins over Notre Dame and Mississippi State, wins over Auburn, went over Florida. It's very close with A&M and Texas Tech. I feel like Texas A&M kind of, they won comfortably against Mississippi State and Florida, and even that Auburn game they dominated. So yeah, this one is really, really close for me. What's better, wins over Notre Dame, Mississippi State, and Auburn, or Utah, Houston, Kansas? Also, you got to throw in Florida for Texas A&M, and that's kind of the tiebreaker. I think having that 4th quality win is what gets Texas A&M up to number 4. But I think you can make an argument for Texas Tech at 4 and Texas A&M at 5. Then I think Ohio State at 3. I think this is probably the best team in the country. But resume-wise, they've got the win over Washington. That's, I guess, their best win. Now, Illinois I have ranked, so I guess you would say that's a better win. Washington only has 1 loss. The win over Texas looks better now. A dominant win over Minnesota. It's very close. But I think you look at Miami's wins over South Florida and Notre Dame. Those are teams that I've got ranked. Notre Dame I have, again, in the top 10. You look at wins over Florida State and Florida. Not just the fact that they won those games, but they went out and dominated. I think Florida State and Florida combined are better than Illinois and Minnesota. That's why I've got Miami at number 2. Again, based off of resume. If we're going by who I think is the best, I think Ohio State's probably the best team in the country. And then Indiana, though, at the top. I think you have to look at that win over Oregon. That is I would say probably the best win in college football right now. I don't know if any team has a better win than going on the road and beating Oregon. They were so dominant against Illinois. They were able to go on the road and beat Iowa. Those are 3 really strong wins. And I think Indiana has the best resume right now in all of college football. Now, I don't think they're going to be able to keep that spot if these teams continue to stay undefeated, because Indiana does not have a very tough schedule coming up. But it's, as of right now, yeah, I think Indiana should be number 1, at least based off of resume. Give me your thoughts on my rankings. Give me your top 25 down in the comments below.